Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen, whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going On allpointstv.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and we come to you every Monday from 2 o'clock to 3, and every second and fourth Mondays we are ahead of the program called Satura's Black History Corner that comes on at 3:30 and lasts about 30 minutes, and that's every second and fourth Mondays, and they will be back with you next week. We are, as always, very delighted to have you with us, and we'll be here for the next hour. I'm going to make sure today that we do not forget to start out the program with a part of a program we had planned to do last week in terms of the Bill Cosby situation. We're going to be talking about that first. And then, of course, I want to give some culminating comments, some ending comments, hopefully it'll be ending comments, on what is happening and what has been taking place in Ferguson. And there are some new developments that are very encouraging around some of the persons that are coming out speaking that I want to share with you as well, and to inform you that there are some new voices that are appearing on the scene. And this is very refreshing, that there are some new folks on the horizon that I think are in a position to start taking over the airways and some of the trailways so that we can begin to get some new energy into what is called the civil rights movement, which really was over. This is my own view, but I think I can document it. Nobody else has said this, but the civil rights movement pretty much ended for all practical purposes in 1965. And I'm going to see how many persons catch on to that fact by looking back and seeing what was really going on in the South, which would clear up a lot of things we're doing right now in terms of the racial narrative in this country, where we are seemingly, when we believe that the the whole society is flawed, rather than looking at it from a political standpoint in terms of the drivers of the energy out here was not the American people, but the politicians who were getting a political benefit by their own discriminatory conduct, and the ones paying the price for it were the general members of society that were not actually causing that. They were not the catalyst for the segregationist policies. These were political policies in place. And if it's really the character of the American people, or the spirit of America, or the spirit of 76, then you would have seen some evidence of it without the laws being on the books that would in fact make it illegal to do other than to discriminate. In other words, you don't have to make people do what it is in their spirit to do in the first place. And when you look at these Jim Crow laws, why would those laws be necessary if the people were themselves going to be the carriers of that discrimination? And then why do you have to compel them to act in ways that they would act in those ways without the regulations? That doesn't make any sense. And so I think we have to go back and revisit that and really understand the civil rights movement, because I'm not so sure that we really understand it. And I've read a lot of the books from some of the main writers from both on the left and right, and I don't think any of them have actually understood what the civil rights movement was about, and that was to get Wallace and others in the South, which was the political partners in the South, those who had political office and something to gain by the segregationist practices, which really had nothing to do really with their own beliefs. What they were doing was position themselves for political advantage, and we see that in terms of when Governor Wallace, who ran initially, he ran in 1950. Let's see, 58, I think it was. Could have been 56, but I think it was 58 when he first ran for the governorship of Alabama. He was defeated by John Patterson, who won the office that year. And he said, I'm talking about Wallace here, he said after the loss, he said that Patterson had outsegged him, meaning that he had hollered segregation more than he had hollered. Patterson had outsegged him. And so when he ran again, I think it was in 1962, I don't think it was 1960s. I think that the 4 years from that point would have been 1962, because I don't think Patterson won the initial office in 1956. I think it was 58 when he was elected governor. So 4 years from that would be 62. And when Wallace was running again, he had said, and having lost in 58, that he would never be outsegged again, meaning that he would outseg his opponent. And so then, so when he ran again for the office, he said segregation now, segregation tomorrow. That's the Southern drawl that he spoke in. I was used to speaking that drawl myself till I left the South. And when I go back to the South, I listen to my brothers, and I can finally hear that twang. I couldn't hear it when I was down there. When I left and came to the North, I won't tell you how many years that's been, but I could hear it when I go back to the South, and I can hear it in my own family. And anyway, Wallace said segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. And he didn't believe in any of that stuff. But the idea, see, nobody is ever going to object to being advantaged, particularly when they don't merit it. Why would people object to you putting them in a position where they're gaining an advantage over someone without any effort on their part? I don't know if anybody. I mean, you would do it if you have, extracurricular character. But most of us, I think, would in fact accept that we're not going to complain unless the baggage that carries with it is placed upon us, and it holds us in check in some way. But as long as it's affecting the other person, there are not too many people that's going to, unless they have tremendous integrity, going to have an outcry about that. It's just like today, you don't see blacks out having a large outcry against affirmative action. And you can change it and change the name of it. You don't have to call it Jim Crow. But anytime you have segregation being practiced, then that's discrimination.
Well, I wonder after, see, the white population is diminishing. Okay, now that you got the Hispanics are because of thanks largely too now because of Obama's action the other week. The last week.
Yeah.
Okay, when these people now become the majority population, are they going to do away with affirmative action? No, they're going to keep it up. It's going to be conspected. It's going to be like the old boy network that they claim that was so disadvantages to them. They're going to retain it. It's not about actual equality. The whole thing is basically just like feminism. They see in each situation. They don't seek to try to remedy it so eliminate the artificially imposed barriers. A lot of these people want to see it where now it becomes in favor of them and only them forever and ever. The same thing they rallied against and railed against, all the time. So yes. I mean, basically, they don't become any different once they gain power. Matter of fact, they're more abusive because they've seen what the power possibility was. I think they should be held more accountable. Mm-hmm. But they don't. They dismiss themselves. They're giving each other high fives and saying, "Yeah, look what we're doing to so and so now."
Yeah. Well, Walter Williams wrote a very good article about that some years ago, and he was saying that it is interesting to look back in history at those who were discriminated against, that when they in fact take some leverage and they have some power themselves, having been the recipients of discriminatory conduct, you would think they would be more sensitive and sympathetic to placing those kinds of burdens on others, but that is not the way it's been played out in history. And we've seen some examples of it here. In the book written by Jared Taylor called Pave with Good Intentions, he records in one of the chapters of the book a conversation between Thurgood Marshall and William O. Douglas, who was on the Supreme Court when Marshall got there. Marshall having been appointed to the Supreme Court in 1967 by Lyndon Johnson, based upon the legacy of Thurgood Marshall having argued in one of the cases in Brown versus Board of Education, although a lot of misconceptions about his role in it because there were 5 court cases and he only argued one of them, and that was the one that was the Clarendon County case, the one that was in Topeka, Kansas, which was really where Brown was. That was not the one that Thurgood Marshall argued, but a lot of that's gotten lost in terms of how history then tends to accommodate that which happens in the aftermath of a certain event. And so it's just like, for example, we have King as the head of the civil rights movement, singular to all the others who are out there, because today King, well, his assassination, of course, was part of it, and then the folklore built around him after his death, and then the things we make of the "I Have a Dream" speech. So now it's singular to Martin Luther King. That's a change after the event. And Thurgood Marshall was heralded as the attorney for what was seen as a singular case of Brown versus Board, when Brown versus Board was really five court cases. So anyway, Thurgood Marshall is on the Supreme Court, appointed by Johnson in 1967, and we could tell he was on a super highway to the Supreme Court by the fact that they made him a circuit court judge first, give him some experience. So then from that bench he would be chosen to go to the highest court in the land. But sitting on the court, and now a member of the body that he had argued for non-discriminatory conduct before the court, and this is 4 years after Dr. King had called for a nation where his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Of course, that would be because the color of your skin was considered to be a holdback, if that would become the standard. Of course, right now, if you begin to do what King called for, which is to talk about the content of character, we look down in Ferguson, that standard would not necessarily apply today, but in King's day, you could call for that. So anyway, go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I've been hearing the term protesters for the first connection. Okay, protest to me is like you maybe do a chant, you hold up signs, you march around a building, pulling things out, beating the hell out of people, setting fire to places. I think that does constitute as a riot,
Yeah, I would call it a riot, and there are some trying to act like there was a rebellion. It has so many different channels and go into that conversation. But when you're tearing up your own community and you're burning things down, which make it more difficult for you once your anger subsides, and now you got to go across town to do your shopping. Because I'm going to tell you right now, John, you've seen it in other places where they've had this problem of riots. When they rise up, they burn the community down in the stores. When they get their insurance money, they'll be fools to rebuild in the area where they just got through being burned out of their business, and they're going to actually locate in the same place. They got to move into another neighborhood where when people get mad, they don't burn anything down.
Well, it's like, they've already threatened the people in Ferguson. If you don't rebuild, you're going to have hell to pay. It's like, oh yeah, if you can't find me and I'm not in your area, good luck finding me.
Yeah.
I would never go back there again after you burn my.
They're not going to go back. And we saw. Look, I went back. I went back when I was watching what was happening and unfolding in Ferguson. I went back to watch the riots that had occurred in previous years, the ones that led to the Kerner report, the Kerner Commission being appointed by Johnson in 1967, and the Kerner report out of Kerner, the former governor of Illinois, that was appointed over the National Advisory Committee on Civil Disorders. They were trying to figure out what all these riots were about, and Otto Kerner headed that commission. And you look back and see what was going on that led to that commission that made its report in 1968. And the culminating riot would have been the one that had in Detroit, not too far from where we are right now in our studio here. And that was the riot in Detroit in 1967. But you go back to the one they had going back to, 1954 in Harlem, and also 1964 in Harlem. That was another one. The one in 65 in Watts, and out in Los Angeles. Nobody even in Los Angeles knew where Watts was until they had the riot there. And all these riots going on, they wanted to find out what are these riots about. And the Kerner Commission was set up to study these events, because we were making strides toward freedom, which is what King wrote about in 1958 in his book, in the aftermath of the Montgomery bus boycott, which had been successful, not because of King being out of the street, he got all the credit for it. Really, the reason why the buses were integrated in Alabama was because the NAACP, out of the limelight, took the bus issue to court, and they won in the court that the segregation laws in Alabama were in fact unconstitutional. And King, of course, being out there in the street demonstrating for 386 days from December the 5th, when the bus boycott was announced, until it was actually ended by the Supreme Court ruling. Everybody thought King had caused that, but really it was because of the work done by the NAACP, headed by Thurgood Marshall, and well, the legal team was headed by Thurgood Marshall, and the organization itself was led by Roy Wilkins. So anyway, when all of you get past the folklore to the history, Thurgood Marshall was appointed to the Supreme Court in 1967 by Johnson, and he's on the court now having a conversation with William O. Douglas, one of the liberals on the Supreme Court bench, and he said to Thurgood Marshall, he said, Thurgood, you were arguing before the court about a non-discriminatory policy we ought to invoke here based upon the 14th Amendment, which calls for the equal protection of the laws. And now that you're here, we want you to join with us, the liberals on the court, and to maintain that thrust and continue it forward so that we can have that practice in other venues as well. And Thurgood Marshall's answer was pretty much what you see when you are talking about a situation in which your ox is being gored, but when you are able to do the goring yourself, you may change your mind because it may not be based upon a character, or based upon principles or your own personal integrity. And Thurgood Marshall answered that to Douglas's call for having a non-sectarian understanding of the equal protection of the laws that doesn't apply to just one segment of the population, but applies to all segments of the population. Thurgood Marshall answered Douglas and said, "You all you've been discriminating against us all these years, and now it's our turn." And that conversation is word for word in the book by Jared Taylor called Paved with Good Intentions. And it was paved with good intentions, but look what the outcome was. If you really want to know the outcome, you can read this book by Chevy Steele, one of his best works, called By the Content of Our Character. And you can read that in terms of the call that King had. And his other book is also very important, understanding that what happened in terms of how the dialogue was changed from one of talking about inclusion based upon merit, and now talking about having discrimination practice from the other side of the racial fence, where the people that were once the ones that the policies were directed against, they now want to direct the policies against others, as if it never happened to them, and they don't have any sensitivity how that feels. Is it causing it to be acted upon the lives of those who at one time were the beneficiaries of it, but now they want to be advantaged by the same things they once complained about? And you read about it in another one of Chevy Steele's books called White Guilt. And the subtitle of the book, which is How Blacks and Whites Together Destroyed the Promises of the Civil Rights Movement. If they had kept the thrust upon having a standard of merit where you're not judged by the color of your skin but by the content of your character, it would have served both sides well, and it would have served the ends of the country better, because you wouldn't have some of the things we see going on right now where people are feeling licensed to have privilege, when you should have a standard where everybody, in terms of how it plays out individually, so each person has to earn his own way, earn his or her own way, where merit becomes a standard so that it's equally applied to all of the citizens. And we lost an opportunity there. It's what Chevy Steele is talking about in this book called White Guilt, How Blacks and Whites Together Destroyed the Promise of the Civil Rights Movement. There was tremendous promise in the movement, but there's also a tremendous lack of understanding of what this movement was really about. And a lot of people have not understood this very day. And I don't think very many of the scholars understand it because they seem that, in fact, I heard Obama. I don't know what Obama understands. He doesn't understand very much of anything. But I heard him say, in terms of the verdict that was passed down in the Michael Brown case, I heard him talking about this was not just something for Ferguson, but this is something that the whole nation has the answer for, is that the verdict was in fact inappropriate given the evidence, even given as if he had set in on the evidence placed before the jurors over the course of 60 hours where they interviewed 70 people. Did the president sit in on any of those hearings? And yet he acts like this was such an inappropriate ruling that was passed down that it was a lack of justice, because you can't get justice anywhere in the country, and just Ferguson is just the place where it played out last. And that's so much nonsense. Hopefully get around and coming back to that conversation later on. But I do want to deal with what I talked about I was going to deal with last week and didn't get around to it. And that is the situation that involves the iconic entertainer Bill Cosby. And I want to make some comments here that nobody else has made, because I think we have to clear up a couple of things here about why it's so hard for people to believe that Bill Cosby could be involved in the kinds of things that he is being accused of. And I heard Whoopi Goldberg come out and say that she didn't believe the accounts because it was he said, she said, and you can't go with he said, she said. Well, this is no longer he said, she said. This is he said, they said. And there are 16 they saids that are now out there claiming the same thing, and the narratives are similar. And the question that it raises is that if these allegations have merit, then why did they wait so long to bring those allegations forward, since the first of these 16 cases would have been back in 1969? I'm going to answer that question because you have to understand a couple of things here in terms of how political correctness plays out in America, particularly as it relates to race. And you have to understand the left and right aspects of the racial paradigm in this country. You'd have to know something about why it was open season in the early part of the 1990s when Clarence Thomas was being confirmed for the position of the Supreme Court, following after Thurgood Marshall, by the way, and did not have the endorsement, the enthusiastic endorsement of the civil rights community. You could understand then why it was okay to have Anita Hill come before the Congress and make all kinds of unproven claims against Clarence Thomas. They never had another person come before to the Senate to validate this has happened in other cases. It was a singular case to Anita Hill. There was one person that was waiting in the wings to go before the body, but never did so, having gotten cold feet when she saw this wasn't going well in terms of Anita Hill, and it was clear that Clarence Thomas was going to be confirmed because the black community was not taking the drinking the Kool-Aid from the civil rights leadership, and they were in fact endorsing Thomas, because they knew that if Thomas was not confirmed, they were not going to put another black person to court. And it made the NAACP back down also, because if they had been seen in black America as having imposed a black person being on the Supreme Court, and there was no black on the Supreme Court as a result of that, they would have paid the price for it themselves. And they already weren't so much in the forefront of being a civil rights organization in front of the black community anymore, because they had done their work. And they had done their work as of 1954, and there was no other work to be done, certainly after 1965, with the passage of the civil rights voting rights bill. 64, you had the civil rights bill passed. 65, you had the voting rights bill that was passed. A reaffirm would have been passed in 57, and also would have been passed in 1870 with the 50th Amendment. So they wanted to wane in the first place, and this would have solidified another nail in the coffin of these archaic civil rights organizations. They couldn't afford that, so they had to back down from that. But you have to know that to come out against an iconic figure on the left causes problems. You can do that on the right pretty much because they're kind of like outlaws in their own community. You know the names they use for them, and that is the going rate, and what the name calling exposes them to a certain vulnerability in accusations that you would not see with iconic figures on the other side. I give an example of that in terms of Herman Cain. Herman Cain, Glory Allred, was going to make sure that the liberal narrative that the Republican Party is racist to the core. These Republicans hate women, they hate blacks. Don't forget Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. And don't forget that the Republican Party is the one that pushed through the 13th, the 14th, and 15th Amendments.
But you know what's weird, though? I mean, did you see the quote that was going around on Facebook? It was like a quote from some character in the West Wing. And he goes, yeah, use that, label, liberal. And he goes, they did this. And all the things he named for the first 6 of them, at least, were all things that the Republicans had done. And it was like, yeah, and everybody else was putting that out on the postings that ensued, They co-opt everything.
Yeah.
I have a friend that said,
of course.
They co-opt everything. Look, we love everybody.
Right.
It was like, yeah, well, let's face it. Wasn't it segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever? Was that a Republican?
Yeah,
no.
And what they're trying to claim, when you find out the narrative is wrong, that these people were Democrats, now they want to make the claim that, yeah, they were Democrats then, but what they did, they changed over, and now they became Republicans, and every one of them is now in the Tea Party.
Well, you know what?
That's what they're pushing today.
They actually have a plaque. I think it's in Illinois, on a wall of a building that says Abraham Lincoln was a Democrat. They actually have a plaque, so now it's literally written in stone or ensconced by stone or something like that he was a Democrat, and he was the first Republican president ever elected.
Right. John, they're going to be surprised to find out that Dr. King was a Republican. If anybody thinks, and they've had a great debate about this back and forth, if anybody thinks that Dr. King is going to join the Democratic Party when the whole power structure in the South that he's fighting against is that of the Democratic Party machine, the solid South, where every government in the South is a Democratic government, because that's a holdover from Reconstruction, Civil War, and etc. And there are no Republican governors in the South at this point. And so to say that King is going to be a Democrat when he's opposing Democrats in every part of the South he goes into with the Civil Rights Movement, he couldn't go anywhere and then face a Democrat. And he's going to join the Democratic Party.
But you know what always puzzles me? My own grandfather.
That's the history they teach you today.
My own grandfather, my mom's mom, mom's dad, he was born in this country, but his family just basically within 15, 20 years of getting here, he was born. Or at least the 10 years anyway. But he voted for Democrats, and it was the Democrats who belonged to the Klan who used to burn crosses on his family's lawn and harass them when he worked at the factories. It was the Democrats from the South up here harassing him. I mean, I was sitting scratching my head. I was like, why'd you vote for these people? You backed this party. But it's because of Union, which he belonged to, basically took your dues and handed it over to the Democratic Party at that time.
Yeah, John, there's a book out. The classic written by the great Booker T. Washington, who is America's second greatest son. The greatest son this country, black son. The greatest black son this country has produced is Frederick Douglass. And that's followed by the great Booker T. Washington, founder of Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama. He built an institution. So I have to put him above the rhetoricians such as W.E.B. Du Bois. That's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings because they got Black Studies Department named after W.E.B. Du Bois. They don't have any department, never will have one named after Booker T. Washington. You can take that to the bank. But Washington was the second greatest black son this country has produced. And I say that because I think you judge greatness not from the heights that they reach, but from the depths from which they come. And you look from where Douglass came, and you look from where Booker T. Washington came, and then see what they did and what they achieved based upon how far back they had to come to achieve that. And you have to say then that King is a a third, a distant third, because King was born by comparison with a silver spoon in his mouth. But you look at, I'm talking here about this aura that we carry about the segregation of the South, and we have this noise being made about the Democratic Party was not the party of the Klan. It wasn't a party of segregation. It wasn't a party of Jim Crow. And if it was, if you catch them at that, and if it was that, then guess what? All of them changed their mind and they went over and joined the Republican Party. And so therefore we just make that narrative and keep on going as if the other history doesn't matter. Even that history has been changed and altered to fit the circumstance, but that's not really true of what they're saying. Even in the civil rights bills that were passed in 64 and 65 under Johnson, a majority of Republicans in larger numbers voted for it than the majority in the Democratic Party, although they had a Democratic president. And all they were doing, quite frankly, was repeating the bill that the Democrats had opposed to the point where the Republicans had to pass it in total in 1957 because you had a Republican administration at that time under Dwight D. Eisenhower. Nobody even heard of this civil rights bill that was passed in 1957. But the changed history is that the Democrats love blacks and they love women. And to be honest with you, to be perfectly honest with you, there's not a single politician in the universe that hates a voter. Now, I don't know what the feelings of the Democrats or the Republicans were before 1920, but I can tell you after they passed the 19th Amendment, everybody loved them some women. I mean, politically. And after 1965, I don't care what the feelings were that Wallace and those guys had, Eastland over there in Mississippi, Stenners over there in Mississippi, Barnett in Mississippi, and over Forbes in Arkansas, and you name them, Wallace in Alabama, it didn't matter. Once you get the right to vote, then you don't have any politicians that's going to be up there talking about segregation now and segregation tomorrow and segregation forever. In fact, if you go back and look at Wallace, Wallace was the biggest segregationist con artist that was out there. Now, none of them believe this stuff now. None of them believe that stuff. In fact, they were behind the scenes. You go read some of these books. They were behind the scenes, and they were having these deals made. When Kennedy, for example, when John F. Kennedy called down to Ross Barnett in Mississippi. Now, don't forget, they're blocking a veteran from going to school. That was James Meredith. And they were blocking him from going to school. He was a veteran now, and he's going to try to be the first one to integrate Ole Miss, the one that was they had a good thing going there in the football. They had 1 and 2 possibly in terms of the nation, 2 football teams. Now they've fallen way back. But I was really looking forward to seeing that at the end because this is a new day. They got all those black folks on the team now. But you go back to his history when they were fighting this battle, and I wanted to see them as number 1 and number 2 because that just gives us another visual of how much progress has been made in the country. But they have fallen back, so neither one is going to be in the Final Four, and you're going to have maybe just one representative down at the University of Alabama, where Wallace was standing in the schoolhouse door. But they look at their team out there now, so that just gives you an indication again how much progress this country has made. But none of these guys believe that stuff they were talking about. When Kennedy called down to Barnett and told Barnett that we're going to send some representatives down there. We don't want them to be harmed by the National Guard. These are federal agents we're sending down there because Meredith has earned his right to go to that school. He fought for the country. He's a veteran. And what are you doing down there? So here's a conversation that they had. Ross Barnett asked Kennedy, could you have the federal marshals who are going to escort Meredith to to Ole Miss University, can you have your marshals to pull their guns out and force me to move to the side, meaning that way I can take the use of force against me and go to the next election and claim that I had no other choice. The federal marshals overwhelmed me with the federal force, and look at these monsters in Washington. He can run on that campaign. And they had made a deal, and what Katie told her, we can't do that, but we will, in fact, put enough force in place that you'll be seen as having to move to the side because the federal authority supersedes in Article 6 with the supremacy clause in the Constitution. We can use that in order to make you move because the federal authority supersedes that of the states, inside the states. I don't know how that happened. That wasn't the intention, but they could claim that. And that was the thing that was going on behind the scenes politically. Bossman did not believe in all that stuff he was talking about. These people were grandstanding. And out there in the larger arena, the people that were being advantaged by this grandstanding were not going to say, we don't want these benefits because, hey, we haven't earned anything, so don't give us any privilege. But if you think that's racism, black people are not refusing any privilege they're getting because of unearned and unrequited advantage being given because of race. They're not saying we don't want any. In fact, they're fighting for the inclusion of affirmative action.
If that's the truth, then Obama should be the first to resign if he felt some kind of miss about what he got without being deserved. Because
Obama is an affirmative action president. John, you know it and I know it. There is no way in the world a person with as thin a resume as this president had. What had he accomplished before he became the nominee?
He got elected a senator. Then he spent most of the time as senator running for president. And I mean, and if anybody else, if that was a white candidate or his Asian candidate, the first thing you say, he has no administrative experience.
That's right.
Well, he ran a nonprofit into non-existence. Okay, I mean, I guess that nonprofit he oversaw was out of money, ran out of money, and that's pretty hard to do because you don't have to do you don't really. You just ask for more money from your funding source, and they give it to you.
Yeah, they lowered the bar for Obama.
Did you see?
And that's what we're getting right now, a lowered standard of administrative leadership by this president. This CEO of the nation now is incompetent.
Well, to his defense, though, I have to say, if you just look at the stuff that Clinton got away with, is basically, it was just a continuation of the thing we started with Clinton to get away with.
Clinton was incompetent also. You know, there's a book out written by Dick Morris, who was the advisor to the Clinton administration, got a book out. It's called Off with Their Heads. It's a very good book, by the way. It talks about the inside of Dick Morris. You know, Morris was in a liberal administration, but what he saw going on there is why he's a conservative right now. But he says in that book, he said every one of the problems that was inherited, jihadist problems inherited by Bush was incubated, these are his words, was incubated during the Clinton administration. I mean, they would do some things over there in the Middle East against our interests, and Clinton was afraid of confronting these jihadists, and they sent a Tomahawk missile over there. They would miss everything, and that's all they would do, and people over there laughing at them. That's the kind of military might that you're willing to put in place to stop anything. We're going to go and do some more stuff. So it was incubated during the Clinton administration, according to Dick Morris, who was the advisor to Clinton. And this idea that we had any competence in that administration is also a misnomer. Both of them were incompetent. The idea that we had 20 million jobs created in the Clinton administration, that wasn't because of Clinton. That was because in 1994, the Gingrich Revolution took place during the midterm election, and we did in that year what we just did 20 years later in 2014, where we threw those Democrats out. That's what happened. I mean, look at now we can do some things to go beyond what the Democrats are doing. All they want to do is grow government and stifle our productivity.
I see the Democrats post stuff on Facebook, and they'll say, like, in the Clinton era, you had the most, upbeat economy, peacetime economy, and all these years and all this stuff. And it's like they're dependent on an uninformed public or people who just have selective memories, because the House and the Congress create spending bills. He wanted the job creation bill that actually is going to cost $80,000 to create a job that might last 6 months to a year, at the cost of $80,000 for a job that was going to last that long. The bulk of it going to the teachers and instructors for these new vocational programs. But yet they're balking at just giving money or tax breaks to people who are already creating jobs out in the private sector. Mm-hmm. So I mean, if he had got his job creation bill, if he had kept the Democrats in power, in the House and Senate, we would have been at a fiscal cliff 15 years ahead of where we're at now. But they don't want to give that credit. They want to give the balance we had and all that stuff. They want to give the credit totally to Clinton and not to the House and Senate, which was largely Republican under his term.
John, you make an excellent point there. I want to play off that point for a minute and say something that's not been said. Is that this idea that we want people working across the aisles and cooperating, and we want to have singular, party push and things like that. Government has worked better when we had this friction. In other words, the Republican Party took the Clinton administration and pulled him across the line where he was and brought him by his lapel and by his shirt and shook him up and brought him over there. That was a friction between the two. When we had a Democratic administration in the houses in the two branches of the legislative of the Congress, the legislative branch of government, and we've had the president in the same party. Look what we've gotten as a result of that. Look what we got in terms of Obama. Government doesn't work better when it has no friction. Now we need to have this friction to hold these parties in place. Was the intention of the government. We need to have tension in government. Well,
that's basically P.J. O'Rourke's summation.
And there's evidence otherwise.
P.J. O'Rourke's summation of bipartisanship. He said, they talk about gridlock being a problem. He said, look at gridlock as like being a barrier between your child and a mauling bear. You want that barrier there.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, politicians at the core of their personalities, they might have an R or a D after their names, but they're sociopaths. They wear suits, they get nice haircuts, but they're sociopaths. And if they go unchecked, if they don't have another group of sociopaths who have other intentions they have to deal with, they're going to run the upshot. You're going to have total chaos and total tyranny, basically, to reassert some kind of order. And that's what you got to have friction. You got to have these tensions, and you got to have. What you going to have a country if you get one group always getting everything they demand? I don't want corporations to get everything they want.
Right. John, let me ask you. You raised the question that I definitely agree with you in terms of the psychology that's in place with those in power in Washington. What percentage of the people would you say in Washington are sociopaths?
I'd say 60%. Right off the top of my head, about 60%. You might have some people that start out good intentions, but once you realize the power you can have over people's lives, it's got to affect you. I don't care what kind of personality or moral concepts you subscribe to or allegedly subscribe to. That kind of power and that kind of adulation, you start believing the myth about yourself.
I hate to tell you what my number would be. I'll give that some other time. My number is much higher than that, but it's certainly more than 50%. But my number is much higher because I just look at what they're doing, and I think I don't think we're going to be able to return to normalcy until we understand who we have in power. And my argument is that the only thing that really saves us in this country, that sets us apart from other nations, is our system that was put in place by the framers. I can't even imagine how bad things would be if they had the power of Kim Jong-un over there in North Korea, because we elect our leaders in this country, but look what we're getting. And then if they had Kim Jong-un's power, it is unfathomable what we would have to deal with these kinds of leaders who are elected officials who are acting this way, and they are acting as if they don't have to answer to us. And can you imagine if that were really true to the point where we could not go to the polls every 2 years and have something to say about this? I think that you would have something much worse than what you have in these totalitarian states if we did not have the system in place. It's not the politicians that are that different in this country than they are elsewhere. What's different is our system, and we have the framers to thank for that. That's why they're trying to break out from underneath what the framers put in place, because they realize those are the shackles that have been placed upon their desires to take power and just forget about having the answer to the people. And I said before I came to the studio today that Mary Landrieu, you're going to be the next one we're going to be coming after, because on the 6th, 5 days from today, we're coming after you. And you can bring the Clintons in there all you want to. It's hammer time. And people are not going to forget your 97% voting record where you support this president 97% of the time. And you can't say now that the election is up upon you and you have a runoff that you have amnesia. We don't have amnesia. And I'm in contact with those in Louisiana, the Tea Parties down there, and we are working behind the scenes, and we're doing some things there. And I can tell you right now, you're going to lose by double digits.
Do you know what? It surprises me. I think the American people are far too forgiving of their politicians. I mean, we don't. It seems like Clinton's got a failed record. I mean, everybody's talking about not wanting to push for Hillary to be run for president.
Mm-hmm.
Look at her track record. The only thing she did right in her life, you want to call it right, is she attached herself, married Bill. She went further than she would have if she tried on her own. I mean, she was actually suspended or kicked off the group when she was trying to impeach, writing up articles of impeachment against Nixon for unethical behavior. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not a great start for your career. Yet she got chance and chance and chance again to keep on doing. And yet when you talk to people out there, especially in this area, they act like these are the next saviors. And what track record these people have to indicate that they even have the possibility for that? And it's like crickets. In their response, you don't respond. I mean, I don't like Republicans. That's the reason why I can never be a Democrat. I don't believe in infallibility. I mean, and that's what it seems like to be a requirement to be a Democrat.
What I'm trying to do right now on Facebook, more than any other place, is to put out there in front of the public, hopefully we can have a dialogue about it at least, and that is that the problem is incumbency. And they've sold us this party apparatus. This wasn't even intended by the framers. George Washington was very fearful of political parties and did not belong to a political party at the outset of the nation's history because he knew the antagonism would bring about. But this idea that people get into parties and they're going to vote party lines and things of that sort. I had a friend that told me on November the 4th, he just simply went down and said, look, all Democrats, now, all Democrats can't be right, and all Republicans can't be right. You got to have somebody in there that did something that is not within your wheelhouse of understanding. So you mean to tell me every Democrat is fine and every Republican is wrong on everything? But that's what we are. What I'm trying to get out is that we have to look at incumbency, and we have to be ruthless. And the reason why is because the vote is the only nonviolent weapon we have. We have to use it ruthlessly. Anybody that comes and takes something that we don't want them to take, like health care, and we've never had a majority that said that we wanted them to socialize the lifeline and the lifeblood of this country, because the health care system is your lifeline and controlling your life from cradle to grave, and that's what health care is. And to give that authority to these politicians that don't run anything well is a travesty. And those that voted for it, and all the Democrats voted for it, they got to continue to pay for that. I mean, 1/3 of the Senate was up for re-election in 2014. That's 2 years after they passed it. Okay, so more, 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election in 2016. Another 1/3, that'll be all of them by 2018. The other 1/3 will be 2018. We can't forget that. John, you talk about having a memory. We got to remember that until 2018.
All I know is, as soon as we got rid of Levin already, haven't we? Or he's not going to run for election again.
Who is that?
Carl Levin.
Yeah, Levin.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great. But I know they're probably going to likelihood roll in another Democrat into that role. I mean, it's like I don't see the state doing so great, the country doing so great, but we'll roll in like. I mean, you're just saying about about voting constantly, consistently, just for Republicans or for Democrats. The only Democrat I voted for the last election, the one a couple weeks ago, I voted for Jim Ananick because I like Jim. I know I met him. I don't agree with I don't agree with the way he votes a lot of times.
I'm impressed with him in terms of coming before the voters and having community meetings with them and explaining what he's doing. And that impresses me. When you come to before the voters, explain yourself, justify what you've been doing, and show some accountability. I can go for that. I don't expect you to be perfect. But when you totally dismissed the voters, we were saying we didn't want you to take over our health care.
Chucky Schumer saying that, oh, maybe we shouldn't. Was it a good thing? I was like, do you think they're Chucky boy?
He sees the handwriting on the wall, because he's up for re-election in 2016, and he's now campaigning to get away from what he's actually done. People can't believe it. How did you flip-flop when you were so strong? 100% of you voted for Obamacare. Well, you saw the polls. You saw what happened at the polls November the 4th.
You know my analogy for politicians doing
Jesus meeting.
The politicians doing that. It's like I hate to say it's kind of a graphic illustration, but you ever watched a dog when they go use the bathroom? You know, the solid stuff. Yeah. Then they fling it. Then they get away from it. That's exactly what politicians try to do.
Yeah, if they smell what they did, they want to run from the excretion. But you know one thing. The voters are learning something, and I hope they understand what they learned. They learned something in 2014, and that is that they have the power of the ballot, and they use it effectively in 2014. I saw, when I first saw this, I saw the handwriting on the wall, quite frankly, in Virginia, when they had Eric Cantor was running in the primary. Everybody knew that he was one of the persons, he and Trey Gowdy, were going to be vying for the speakership, because we're not going to tolerate Boehner in there another 2 years. After January the 3rd, when the new Congress is sworn into office, there's no way in the world John Boehner is going to be the standard bearer. Not with the election coming down in 2016, and we don't like, and they know that people are fed up with Boehner's leadership. So he's gone. And Eric Cantor was going to be one of the persons vying for the position of Speaker of the House, because we knew that the Republican Party was going to maintain the House. In fact, they gained some additional seats in the House, along with taking over the Senate. People could not believe that Eric Cantor, in a position to be Speaker of the House, lost in the primary. And what was really interesting about that, when you looked at the reaction they had in Washington, they were saying, but he was going to be in line for Speaker of the House, and why are they picking on him when he was the majority leader in the House of Representatives? Well, it's because, and let me break this to those of you who were shocked that happened, because the voters in Virginia understood that if the House is in fact failing to represent in ways in which we would approve of, and the numbers show we didn't approve. Only 13% of the people believe that the Congress is doing a good job. I don't know where they've been. They've probably been sleeping under a rock somewhere for the last 6 years. None of them are doing anything up there that can be endorsed in terms of some party apparatus is in place that's putting us first and putting their own interests, political interests, on the back burner. I don't see any of them doing that. But who do you hold responsible when the government is failing? You hold the responsibility and place at the doorstep of the leaders. And so Cantor was one of the leaders. We all knew he was a majority leader in the House. So you expect to pay the price for it. And people were so surprised. I tell you what they did, though. They went to find out. If you notice that everybody was so interested. What does this mean? Why did Cantor lose? They were trying to figure out what was going on out here. And they found out, if they didn't know before, they found out on November the 4th what's going on. The people are riled up out here. And I hope they stay riled up, because we have to continue to clean house. Anyone that goes against the voters now, you learn the lesson out here. Hope you will understand what you learn. You know, people learn when they don't think that they've learned. That's why you can't get people riding in the back of the bus. They don't know anything about Rosa Parks. But people have learned even if they don't think that they've learned. And they learn that they don't have to ride in the back of the bus unless they want to. They may sit at the back of the bus. You can't make them go back there, because they've learned about you back of the bus, even though they don't know how they learned it. And so we've learned a lesson here. I hope you will bring it into consciousness of what you learned, and that was you learned that you have a power to affect change by the tool that you have. You have a weapon here, and it has to be used wisely, and it can't be used by you talking about you're in this party or in that party, because really the problem is incumbency. I mean, you know what I'm hurt by, John? I'm hurt by the fact that Carl Levin was allowed to stand down at the 5th day. We should have thrown him out of there. After you have been in there for a period of time, and I'm not going to say what the period of time is. I have my own ideas about it, but certainly 58 years is too long unless you know something that you have not been able to get out over the course of more than 50 years. It's more than a half century. Carl Levin's been in power longer than Fidel Castro, who came to power in 1959, and his brother, who he just handed the country over to because he was a dictator, and he handed the country over to his brother, just handed it to him. This is my country. I've been a dictator since 1959. I can't run anymore because I'm senile. So here, you take it over now. That's a dictator. And they've been in there a combined 55 years. And they're dictators. You tell me how it is that Carl Levin can be in the House for 29 different elections, which is 58 years, and he's not a dictator. And he's in there longer than the Castro brothers combined. He is a dictator. He is an elected dictator. Because a dictator is somebody that does not leave power. Over and over and over again, as if they are doing what? Doing nothing up there. Resting on seniority, resting on their laurels. And we have to learn what we learned in 2014 during the midterm election. We learned to throw these people out of there. We learned that we are really the ones in charge. When we say leave, they have to leave. And we need to learn that word and make it repetitious in terms of leaving on a regular basis. We don't need anybody up there staying up there 30 years. Anybody up there 30 years is a hidden dictator. And I didn't even get around to my subject. Let me make this point about Cosby, because I got to at least do some justice to it, because I've been promising this. There's a reason why these women came out at this point in time. The person that's named, and let me get her name down, Andrea Constand, C-O-N-S-T-A-N-D. The reason why she filed the claim against Bill Cosby, you know, she was the director of operations for women's basketball at Temple University. And of course, Cosby, who dropped out of Temple University, but when you become successful, then the university want to embrace you and give you some degrees you didn't earn because they want to write off your name. I mean, you claim you're an alumni and all that. They write off of that. And then, of course, you serve on the board and you want to be alumni. You want to give them some money in terms of supporting the university. So he's on the board when she's there as the director of operations over women's basketball. And she came out in 2005 and filed a suit against Bill Cosby. I get the claim number right here. The civil suit is was filed against Cosby was 05-1099. There's not an income tax form. That's a civil suit filed against Cosby. Well, Cosby settled that case out of court. And he settled it out of court because when she filed, when Andrea Constand filed the suit against Bill Cosby, 13 of the women who had been quiet all this time promised to come to court if they went to court, and they're going to testify that the same thing that she's recounted that happened to her in a more recent time period, because she was claiming this in 2004, 2005. 2005 is when she filed the suit. Now, people are asking, why didn't the other persons come out, and if it really had any credence, why didn't they file a claim prior to that? Well, I'm going to tell you why. The reason why Andrea Constand came out and could come out, given how that plays out in terms of the conservative and the liberal narrative in the black community, is that Cosby had gone before the NAACP in 2004 on May 17th on the 5th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. And he made some comments that were outside of the orbit of how the civil rights movement operates today. It's not really a movement anymore, it's a grievance industry. And what Cosby did, it went before this body, and then invited him in there to be the keynote speaker, because that way he gives a donation to the NAACP also. It was all, these are, certain things, undercurrents of what goes on. So they invited him to speak, but they didn't know what he was going to speak about, and they thought he was going to come there and entertain the guests, and he'd be safe to come in there and talk. And what Cosby did was go in there and inflamed everybody. Talked about personal responsibility, set the middle class up, and was talking about how they need to do more than what they're doing, and this is not racism. I mean, that's a religion on the left. And here's Cosby saying something different from that. Personal responsibility is more important. That weakens Cosby over there with the left. It allows for Andrea Constant to come in now under that weakened status this person had under that venue, and now they come out with the claim. And the other women would come out, ready to come out also, and they were coming out and doing that as well. And when Cosby saw that, he paid off Andrea Constant. And the rest of it was 20, 30 years ago, so they could say that's, look how long it was, and why are they talking about it now? Well, that's why they're talking about it now, because Cosby would have lost some of the aura around who he was with those on the left, and therefore it made it more palatable to what was happening on the Andre Constant's case. Okay, I want to say that before I get off the air, because I promised last week I would do it. Want you to stay tuned to all the programs here at Flint Talk Radio, allpointstv.com, and want you to always follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream on allpointstv.com, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.